Well, it's nice to see all of you on here. Thank you for being here this evening, your time. And I'm happy to share my research that I did for the MSc dissertation. I graduated in 2022 from Aberdeen, and my dissertation was entitled Journey into Mindfulness, a high school's teacher's autoethnographic exploration of 2 decades of teaching. And as a little bit of a rationale for this study, what sparked my interest in wanting to do this study, there were a couple of things that really inspired me. One was the issue of teacher burnout and attrition. In the US, we have an attrition rate of about 2/3 of teachers leaving the profession prior to retirement. I taught high school English for 23 years, and I was also the head of the department for 14 of those years. So I was really seeing firsthand the hiring process. It seemed like it was sometimes a revolving door in my district with teachers coming in and out of the profession. And it was getting harder and harder to retain teachers. Nationally, we are seeing a reduction in the number of students even studying to become teachers. So we're experiencing a teacher shortage. And so I was looking at that. And then there was also this idea of what about teacher health and well-being? We talk a lot about teachers needing to have these pedagogical skills, having to, have good content knowledge. But what about that third component of teacher health and well-being? Is there value in looking in that? And what I was seeing in the research was that, yes, there is value in that, tremendous value, because there's something called emotional contagion. And when I started to dive into this area, I thought, wow, yes, exactly. And all this research is showing that teachers can spread both positive and negative emotions to their students, which not only affects the classroom environment, but it actually can affect student academic performance. And so all of this simply means that research was finally taking note of what students had anecdotally known for ages, that a teacher has the ability to make learning enjoyable or dreadful. And so, guided by both my experience as a high school English teacher for over 2 decades, and also I was a lifelong meditator. Well, I started learning meditation when I was in college, and I've been practicing it ever since. I was also teaching a Vedic form of meditation for about 20 years in tandem with teaching English. It was my side hustle. And I wanted to see, what are the long-term effects of meditation on teachers? There are many, many studies out there looking at the short-term effects. So 8-week studies. Okay, we're going to do an 8-week intervention. And what are the outcomes of 8 weeks of meditation or mindfulness study on teachers? But there really weren't a lot of studies out there on the long-term effects of meditation on teachers. And so knowing that I was one of those people who had taught for over 20 years and also had meditated for over 2 decades, I knew that I needed to explore that a little bit more deeply and to see if there was really something there, if there was any kind of connection to those two things. And my entire teaching career, I was really guided by this philosophy. And this is a quote by Dr. Haim Ginott. And I have it up here on the screen. He was a child psychologist, and he wrote, "I have come to a frightening conclusion. I am the decisive element in the classroom. It is my personal approach that creates the climate. It is my daily mood that makes the weather. As a teacher, I possess tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or humor, hurt or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decides whether a crisis will be escalated or de-escalated, and a child humanized or dehumanized." He wrote that back in 1972. And I think now it has more implications than ever. And so based on my experience as a teacher and as a meditator and my teaching philosophy, I crafted the following research question. What is the impact that meditation has had on me as a high school teacher over the course of 2 decades? And I had several sub-questions. One, has meditation had any effect on my physical and mental health and well-being? Two, has meditation had any effect on my ability to handle stress and conflict? And three, has meditation had any effect on my state of being? So I decided one of the best ways to explore this, was through an autoethnography. What I love about, and I had not done an autoethnography before, so I was learning about what this is, and I was learning about it, I realized, well, this ties into something that has always been very near and dear to my heart, and that's the idea of literature, the idea of storytelling. And I believe there is great power in storytelling. Also, there's great insights to be had with looking at lived experiences. And I just have a couple of quotes that were, said by some researchers, some of the authors really of the foundation of what is autoethnography. So I did a form of autoethnography that's known as the evocative autoethnography, where it really seeks, as Bachner and Ellis say, to make people feel deep in their guts and in their bones using various forms of literary artfulness and storytelling to place the reader in the action. And as Ellis also says, my goal was to produce aesthetic and evocative thick descriptions of personal and interpersonal experiences. I focused on the elements of an expressionist autoethnography, which focuses on expressing a researcher's internal feelings, emotions, and presenting personal and cultural experiences from a thoroughly subjective perspective. All right, so this was the base of why I selected this type of research methodology. All right, so what I did was, my process was to really go back and, I did a lot of, journaling as I looked back. I went through my teacher folders. I went through notes from parents and students that I had received over the years. I went back in through teacher evaluations that I had folders of through the years. And I just started to reflect back on the beginning, middle, and end of my teaching career. And I began to craft these vignettes. My vignettes were told in chronological order. And after each section of vignettes, beginning, middle, and end section of vignettes, I did a reflective piece where I connected my meditation practice with my professional experience and also with related research. If you don't mind, I am going to read to you a sample of one of those vignettes. And I've just realized that all of a sudden it got very dark where I am. So I'm going to turn my light on, excuse me. Okay. Thank you. So this vignette is called Meet Alice. On April 20th, 1999, 2 years into my teaching career, the tragedy of the Columbine High School mass shooting occurred. Unless you were a teacher in America before Columbine and in the years to follow Columbine, I don't think you can fully comprehend just how much this event profoundly and permanently altered our education system and how much it exacerbated the underlying stress and anxieties experienced by both teachers and students. Before Columbine, I had a student who used to come in my room nearly every day and threaten to bring in a gun and shoot me and shoot everyone in the room. I would report it to the office, and the response would be, "Oh, he's just a kid letting off steam. He's not serious. Don't worry about it." But this kid wasn't joking around, and I was quite afraid of him. However, it was before Columbine, and such an atrocity was still inconceivable. It would be comforting if I could say the Columbine tragedy was a fluke event. However, according to the Washington Post, more than 292 more than 292,000 American students have experienced gun violence at school since Columbine. And that was a stat that came out 2 years ago. It's more than that now. Due to the ongoing occurrences of school violence, teachers, administrators, and students have entered a whole new instructional paradigm: surviving an active shooter. You're going to need to wear long sleeves and running shoes. Those were the instructions teachers were given leading up to our in-service training at the start of the school year. Now, in the middle of my teaching career, with the increased number of school shootings across the country, schools were starting to conduct active shooter drills. In our school district and in other districts around us, a system called ALICE was being implemented. ALICE stood for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, Evacuate. This program was being utilized to increase the chance of survival during a school shooting, which previously teachers and students were taught to hide in the classroom, to lock, barricade the door, and squat quietly in the back corner of the room. The problem? Everyone became sitting ducks. So with Alice, you didn't necessarily lock down. We were trained in other options, such as counterattacking with whatever objects we had near us: scissors, books, paperweights, using one's belt to tether the door in a more secure way, all of which really were laughable defenses against semi-automatic weapons. But still, we as teachers strategized and were told we were allowed to bring in anything, except for guns or knives, that we could possibly use as weapons to keep in our classroom. I opted for a wooden club and cans of wasp spray that shot 20 feet. We were trained in how to best evacuate. Was the risk of jumping out of a window better than a bullet? I was on the 3rd floor, way too high, so I was either locking down and counterattacking or trying to evacuate by other means. I grappled with this dilemma. If I was by myself, I had mapped out several possible escape routes and hiding places along the way for safe passage. But if I had 30 students with me, forget it. No way we can move a body of people that fast through the halls and stairwells, while most likely bottlenecking with other classes. No, I had tried to work that out in my head many times. Each time I saw us being trapped in a stairwell, sitting ducks. But getting back to this active shooter drill, live training for teachers, the district brought in people who were equipped with weapons to actually shoot us. It was a live simulation drill in which we were dispersed around the school, and it was go time with active shooters coming at us with pellet guns. We were being shot at. We could do whatever we had to try to survive. We were separated into classes. First, we had to try the lockdown simulation, and I found myself in a room with a group of other teachers. We tethered and barricaded the door with whatever we happened to have. It felt frighteningly realistic. I went into complete survival mode, totally in the present moment, and oddly developed a strength I never realized I had, being able to drag large pieces of furniture across the room. One teacher even commented that she didn't realize I was so strong. Neither did I. I had one goal: don't get shot. Pellet guns might not kill you, but they sure as hell hurt. During training, several teachers in the district did get seriously injured. One teacher even broke her leg trying to avoid the shooter. The English department was put in charge of training the student body on Alice. Every student in the building had an English class, so that was how they ensured training across the school. Instead of live drills, we presented information via PowerPoints and had discussions. It gave students more options for saving themselves. As teachers, we had to watch footage of Columbine, audio included. It haunts me to this day. We had to analyze how more people could have survived. In one instance, there was a couple of students who wanted to run out of the room they were in, but the staff member there told them they had to stay there hiding. They were killed. Running could have led to their escape, and that could have saved them. Now students were taught to do whatever they needed to do to increase their chance of survival. No permission from a teacher is needed. Also, if a student is out in the hall and an active shooter alert is signaled, that's it. If the class goes into lockdown, that door isn't opening for any reason. That student could be banging on the door, pleading to enter, and we are instructed to never jeopardize the rest of the class for one student. So I instructed my students to individually hide and get out of the building in any way they could if they were in a hallway. Never bother returning to a classroom. Run out with your hands up in the air if there were police there, and run out into the adjacent neighborhoods and hide somewhere. These were difficult lessons to teach students. You could feel their anxiety and fear and sense of helplessness. We had other training workshops as well in the event of mass casualties. One workshop was called Stop the Bleed. We were trained to administer tourniquets and stuff gunshot wounds with whatever we had available. Tampons were quite useful for this. The idea of all of this training was to increase survivability. Obviously, being prepared is a good thing. However, with each of these training sessions, there came an added level of fear and feelings of dread. Some of the building staff made jokes about it as a coping mechanism. Other teachers asserted that we should be allowed to be armed with guns to defend ourselves and our students. Not to make light of the seriousness of the matter, but I think I would have been more fearful of some of my colleagues being armed. We all had our own ways of trying to cope with this undercurrent of fear. Meditating was how I personally survived the stress of this new paradigm of education. I found myself meditating more at school. I meditated during my lunch period and sometimes during my planning period. I would shut my classroom door and sit at my desk to meditate for 20 minutes. By meditating during my lunch period, I had a resurgence in my energy levels, while also having a feeling of calmness and presence. In the class periods that followed my meditation, I felt more present for my students. But here's the really interesting outcome. My students could sense the energy of the room. They would enter from a chaotic hall scene, and I would hear them say things to each other, and sometimes directly to me, that they were so happy to be in my room. This was their favorite classroom. They didn't know why, but they really liked this space. It felt warm and welcoming. They would even compare it to other classrooms they said felt colder, harsher, not as welcoming. More than ever, my goal was to help create a sanctuary for my students. I couldn't protect them from all of the dangers of the world, but I wanted them to experience a sense of tranquility and take a pause from the harshness of life, even if just for a class period. So that's a sample of one of the vignettes that I wrote about from the middle part of my career as a teacher. And after looking and writing all of the vignettes and finding commonalities, those strings that run through certain ones, certain key findings, certain patterns emerged. And these are some of them. So the key emerging points were creativity, the ability to handle stress and conflict in the classroom, physical and mental health and well-being, the idea of synchronicity. My experiences of synchronicity increased the longer I meditated. And then the long-term effect of meditation towards the end of my career. Feelings of blissfulness, of compassion, understanding, and loving kindness. And so looking at synchronicity, I have a couple just basic definitions for clarification. And this idea of these are quote chance occurrences that really, are they really chance occurrences? They're not really what we would call typically a coincidence, because they are so meaningful in nature that, as Jung says, it, it's a degree of improbability that they would be mere coincidences. And it's almost a spiritual sense that I felt was received when I had these experiences of synchronicity. When did these different things emerge in my career? Early on in my career, I saw the emergence of more creativity and my ability to handle stress and conflict in the classroom. The more regularly I meditated. In the middle part of my career, those things continued, but then I also noticed that there was an impact on my health, and then I started to have these experiences of synchronicity. In the latter part of my career, all of these continued to be present, but then I noticed some of the more long-term effects of meditation, a slowing of the aging process, a higher level of being awareness. And so, um, instead of having the feeling of being burned out or, dread of having to go to school after 20 some years of teaching, I would walk in the building on many days with almost a blissed euphoric sense. And so instead of, I was presenting in characteristics that were opposite of what research was showing, with teachers having burnout, um, and that wasn't every day always, but I was having more and more of those experiences. And so, in conclusion, so that we do have time for some questions and answers, this is what I posted on Facebook. This was, every day during my career, I had, my mother would call and say, now take a picture of yourself first day of school. So I would have a picture taken of me the first day of school every year. And so this was the picture my husband took of me as I was about to walk out the door of year 23 of teaching. And I posted it saying, yes, this is the first day of my last year of teaching, because I knew at that point that I had already put in for retirement. And because I knew there was something else I wanted to do. I knew I was going to move into teaching meditation and mindfulness full time. And I had already started in this same time. Right after this, I flew over to Scotland, and I had the first classes with the MSc program, the University of Aberdeen, and at Sammy Young, and that was life-changing, truly. So this, I knew going into it what I wanted to do, and the program was really helpful in enabling me to do that. And so when I finished my dissertation, I had different people give me the advice of, including Graham Nixon, who, God bless his soul, he was really supportive of me publishing my work. And I knew that I wanted to share on a larger level of my experience, because I do believe that there's value in looking at the long-term effects of meditation on teachers. And so I expanded my dissertation, and I was given a contract by Routledge Publishing, and it just came out this past year, this year, 2024. And there it is. There's the cover of the book, The Meditation and Mindfulness Edge: Becoming a Sharper, Healthier, and Happier Teacher. But in the book, what I was able to do, which I loved, is I was able to take my research from the dissertation and really not only expand upon it, but make it more accessible to, mainstream readers, to the average Joe, so to speak. And I added a whole section, I talk about this here, that I added a whole section on how these techniques can be applied to any career field, not just teachers, but somebody in the healthcare industry, somebody in business, any career field can benefit from the research that I'm sharing and from meditation from mindfulness. And then in the part 3, I have this whole thing on just really simple suggestions that anyone can do starting right now to shift your energy. The energy of not just your energy, but the energy of your classroom or the energy of your work environment, the energy of your home. Simple little techniques. And if anyone is interested, I do have here, these are just a few of the things that I referenced in this presentation, if you want to look up anything that I mentioned here. So that's, yeah, that's, and now I will ask, I will answer any questions.